and welcome, dear listeners, to the Joyful Dreadful podcast. I'm your kind host, Joy, and tonight we will embark on our journey into the shadows, a place where whispers in the night carry tales of unspeakable horrors. Whether you're a big fan of horrors or just dipping your toes into the unknown, there is something here for everyone. So, prepare for yourself. Please grab a blanket, curl up in your favorite chair, and let the candlelight set the mood. Okay, are you ready? Let's dive into tonight's tale and discover what secrets the shadows hold. Welcome to the Joyful Dreadful podcast, where every story is a friendly fright. During the summer of my first year in the high school, my friend and I decided to go on a trip to a valley in another state. Since we were all students living off our allowances, the peak season rates for pensions or hotels were too expensive for us. And it was a 3-day, 2-night weekend trip, which made it even pricier. So, we scoured every website and finally found a shabby guest house. When we called, they said luckily it was available for reservation. Looking back now, it was a choice I regret. When we arrived, the place was in a remote area, so even though it was peak season, there were hardly any people around. It felt more like the countryside than a travel destination. The guest house was truly in the mountains, but they offered pickup service and the valley was within working distance, so my friend and I were just excited, thinking it was nice and quiet. The guest house looked like an old, long, horizontal house, and it was quite spacious, more than we had expected. The owners, an older man and woman, lived about a 20 minutes drive away from the guest house and told us they would be at the house until 11 p.m. Looking back now, it might have been dangerous for us girls to spend the night alone, but at the time we were completely excited about staying up all night, eating and chatting. Without adults around, there would be no one to tell us to be quiet, and it was our first trip without any adults. The guest house was old and shabby, so it was a bit dirty, but it was cheap and not too bad, so we were just excited. After unpacking our things and looking around, we saw that the guest house was surrounded by a forest on all sides. At the time, we didn't think much of it, but there was a basement storage area in the bottom left corner near the front door. There were stairs leading down to a metal door like those we'd see in the school gym storage room. The entrance was about as wide as an adult woman spreading her arms, so it wasn't very big. We just assumed it was a storage space for fertilizer or lavish items and didn't think much of it. However, from that evening, problems started to arise. In the evening, after having a barbecue, we went back to the room to hang out, eat snacks, and have fun. It was already very late and the outside was really dark. We had played hard at the valley during the day, so everyone, including myself, was exhausted, and we were just watching TV together. We watched it for a long time, but suddenly, somewhere nearby, a cat started crying very loudly. At first, it was just a simple, but then the sound grew louder and louder. You know that distinctive screeching sound cats make? It started to sound like that, almost like a baby crying. The noise escalated into this high-pitched, desperate wail-like. It was a piercing, frantic sound. It was around 1 a.m., so everything was quiet except for the sound of insects, which made the cat's cries even more evident. We thought maybe it was fighting with a dog somewhere. So, two of my friends and I decided to go outside and to see what was happening and maybe toss some snacks to calm it down. But as soon as we stepped onto the porch where we had the barbecue, the cat's cries suddenly stopped, as if someone had flipped a switch. We thought it might have run away, so we looked around, but we couldn't find anything. It was too dark to see anything clearly, so we decided to go back inside our home. But as soon as we stepped back into the guest house, the cat started crying again with the same high-pitched, desperate wail. The sound was so loud, louder than any cat's cry I'd ever heard before. One of my friends opened the window and shouted, "Hey, be quiet!" Surprisingly, it actually went silent, as if it understood. The noise died down a bit, so we went back to watching TV. One by one, we started to fall asleep. Despite our plans to stay up all night, we were just too tired. Our eyes were getting heavy. Just as I was about to drift off, the cat started crying again. It was incredibly frustrating, but we tried to ignore it and forced ourselves to sleep. The cat's cries kept waking us up repeatedly until just before dawn, making it hard to get any rest. By morning, we were all exhausted from the constant interruptions. In the morning, all of my friends were really annoyed because of the cat, so when the guest house owner came by, we told her about it. "There is a cat crying a lot around here. Do you keep one?" we asked. And she said, "Oh, the cat. It hasn't done that lately, but it must be exciting because people are here." We asked again, "So, is it a cat you keep here?" But instead of answering, she changed the subject, saying, "Did you get bitten by bugs last night? The insects around here can be quite nasty." We figured there wasn't much we could do about it and just let it go. The next day, we went back to the valley, took some photos, and had a great time again. So it got dark again, and we returned to the guest house. Everyone took turns showering and getting ready for bed. But then the cat started crying again, just like the night before. Thinking this was the perfect time to tell the owners about the cat, I went outside. It was around 10 p.m., but all the lights were off, so I decided to give up and go back to the guest house. Just as I was turning around, I heard the cat's cries coming from the basement-like storage area next to the front door. The sound was so loud coming through the metal door that I thought the cat must be trapped inside. I was so scared, so I had one friend stand in front and one behind me. And I went down the stairs to the storage area, sandwiched between them. Sure enough, the sound was coming through the metal door, loud and clear. The friend in front knocked on the door, with her hand, and the crying stopped immediately. All three of us started giggling nervously as we went down the stairs. Just as the friend in front reached out to open the door, it opened slightly on its own, creating a small gap. The door opened just enough for a hand to fit through the gap. In that instant, all three of us froze. We were too stunned to make a sound. Through the hand-sized gap illuminated by the flashlight from our phones, we saw a woman inside. At first, we couldn't believe it was a person, but as we looked closer, we saw her eyes reflecting the light, glinting back at us. She was staring at us through the gap. Her face was inches from the opening. I think that was the moment I truly understood what it meant for your heart to stop. It felt like my heart dropped. I've never been so terrified in my entire life like this. The three of us stood frozen on the stairs, unable to move back off. And we were completely paralyzed with fear. None of us could speak. The friend behind me was gripping my shoulder so tightly it felt like it might break. And I was doing the same to the friend in front of me. We just stood there, stuck in that horrifying moment. Then the woman suddenly looked like she was opening her mouth. I thought she was about to say something, so I looked closer and closer. But instead of speaking, she stretched her lips into wide, forming a shape like a joker. Her gums were fully visible through the gap. So I was murmuring like, "What is it?" But then she suddenly screamed. As soon as the woman started making those cat noises with her mouth, all three of us screamed and ran back to the room. Strangely, once we were inside, we couldn't hear the cat noises anymore. We were so terrified that we called the guest house owner, but she didn't answer. Without a car, we had no choice but to stay there until morning. So once we calmed down a bit, we started thinking about our conversation with the owner. When we once talked about the cat, the owner seemed to know about its existence but acted like she didn't. We were supposed to check out at 1 p.m., but my friends and I stayed up all night, too scared to sleep. Early in the morning, we called for a taxi and told the driver the name of the guest house. But the driver said there was no such place on his GPS. Even now, when I'm alone at night and hear a cat crying, I still see that woman's eyes in my mind.